So, Jamie, thank you for coming up here on a Sunday.
Yeah.
To come on the show. So you're from Kelowna, like you were raised here since a young age, and then you left when you were 19.
Yeah.
And you came back here just a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
So what was it like growing up here? Was it very different than it is today?
Well, I grew up in what's now called Lake Country. Used to be Winfield when I was running around there. And yeah, it was just everything that I think people come to the Okanagan to experience. So the lake and the orchards and the sun and just the farms and all of that. So I really enjoyed my childhood. My family worked in Kelowna, so I was in Kelowna a lot back and forth. And eventually I went to middle school at Hollywood Road Middle School.
Okay.
So yeah.
Right. So Lake Country's changed tremendously since you were a kid.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty small.
It was super small.
Right?
Yeah.
And it was a short, quick drive to get to Kelowna.
Yeah.
So what made you leave when you were 19?
Yeah. I didn't really feel like there was a lot here for me, to be honest. I didn't think that there was enough that really kind of piqued my interest. And also I had a really big travel bug, so I don't want to put that actually on the city. It wasn't necessarily the city's fault, but at that time I was in college, and then I decided I didn't want to be in college anymore, and so I left to Europe.
Wow.
Yeah.
What parts?
I lived primarily in Italy, but I was in Greece and in Turkey with some girlfriends to kind of start the trip off, but then I lived in Italy for over a year.
Wow. I've been to Italy, I think, 6 times, and not in the past 15 years. So I'm missing it.
I am too.
What cities were you?
I lived in Milano, so I lived, primarily there, but I traveled all around, of course. Once you're living there, you can kind of hop on a train and see whatever you want.
Super easy. Did you go to Florence?
Oh, yes. Yeah, I love Florence.
Florence is so great.
Yeah.
So Milano, tell us a little bit about that. It's a huge city, right?
Yes, yeah.
And very industrialized.
Very industrialized.
It's the fashion capital of Italy.
Yeah.
What else can you tell us about Milano?
Incredibly authentic.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's all these other beautiful cities in Italy, but Milano is like where you really get the authenticity of the northern part of the country. And so a lot of tourists don't go there because it's like incredibly industrial. But yeah, it's like amazing.
Is it the largest city in Italy? I think.
I don't know.
It might be bigger than Rome.
I don't know.
But, well, that's...
How was the food?
Cool.
Yeah.
The food and the wine. How was that?
Fantastic.
Oh.
Fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when they have like their bakeries and like restaurants basically open 24/7. So.
Right. Oh, it's so nice. So nice. Coffee shops and So you go drinking and then go to a coffee shop and it's just open all night.
Well, and you know what's interesting? I think like that because I was in Europe and then I ended up living in Central America for a bigger chunk of my time away. But I really, when I moved back to Kelowna, it was just so nice to see all of these different little shops and bakeries. And like there was just like the entrepreneurial community here is really thriving. And like I love going to Waterfront Cafe on Abbott Street. Like that's oh my gosh, like it's so beautiful and the staff there are just, they really treat you like your family. And those were the things, like those cultural elements that I didn't really find when I was younger here. And even when I came back to visit, because my family's around here and a lot of my really good friends are here. But over the years, Kelowna's really matured. And that's the biggest thing that I really felt when I moved back. I was like, wow, I'm so proud. Like Kelowna's really matured. And you can find these beautiful, unique spots to go. And I mean, like, you know, get the best croissants. And like, you don't have to go to Italy for it. It's here.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So true. So you went to Central America for a few years. Why did you leave Italy and go to Central America?
I left Italy and came back to the Okanagan for just a quick, teeny little stopover and realized, nope, I'm not ready yet. And so then I went down to Central America. I went down there for a job, and I lived in Costa Rica and ended up buying a house and living there for quite a while and working there.
Wow. What did you do?
I worked for the #1 development in Central America. Okay. I helped head their sales and finance department. And it was a really, really great experience, but it was absolutely nonstop. Like
working.
Oh yeah.
Busy.
Like 7 days a week, 2 days off a year, Christmas and New Year's. Like it was Costa Rica sounds very like amazing.
Yeah.
It is when you're on vacation.
Right. Yeah.
But I mean, I love the experience. It was
I remember
fantastic.
sitting in traffic. Were you in the capital of San Jose or by the coast?
No, I was on the coast, so I really lucked out. I got to work in like a very it's an American development, so I got to work in very like a corporate style American company, which is exactly what I was looking for. But I got to walk out the door, look out my office window, and there's like the ocean in Costa Rica. So.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. I went there once, and I remember there's kind of two areas. Well, three. Yeah. There's like the jungles, and then there's the capital city, which is huge, and then the coastal area, which is the tourist area, and a lot of development happening. So you were on the coast.
Yes, yeah. And San Jose, it's an incredibly interesting city. Most of the population of the country lives in that San Jose Valley, and it's like you kind of get all spectrums of life there, but it's very, very busy. But tons of stuff going on with business. So a lot of people move down there and live in the city to work. But I didn't have to, which I really liked.
Right.
I like being on the beach.
And did you learn Spanish?
Yes, Yes, I can speak Spanish, yeah.
Right. I guess you didn't have to with this job, or you kind of had to live there?
I didn't have to with the job, but I felt like a very big responsibility to learning the language and being really immersed in the culture, because I felt like I was so blessed and so grateful to be able to be living in that country and making the income that I was making and seeing that that's not the normal way down there. And so I really, really made a very big effort in getting involved with the schools and a lot of the barrios and the areas that needed help. And I just think it's really disrespectful if you're living somewhere for a period of time and you don't make an effort to learn the language. I worked with a lot of people as clients that had been down there way longer than me and just didn't bother. They just expected people to learn English. And it's like, well, we're in Costa Rica. Like,
right, yeah.
The language here is Spanish.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I felt a personal need to do that.
That's great. Do you try to keep it up?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I still go down there all the time. I operate part of my business down there, and my children go down there. And
wonderful!
Yeah,
that's great.
Yeah,
I lived in Dominican Republic for a year, and then in South Florida for 2 years. So I became very fluent in Spanish, but I've lost it because I can't find anybody really that speaks it.
You know what? Here. There's a Spanish conversational group that was happening at the Bean Scene downtown on Bernard. And there's a lady, I think I have her number in my phone. I'll get it for you. She's fantastic, and she does Spanish lessons, and she either works, she'll meet her clients in Bliss Cafe or at the Bean Scene, and she's phenomenal for Spanish.
So nice.
So I can hook you up with that.
That's great. Wonderful.
See, it's so cultural here now.
It is. So many great connections.
Yeah.
So you came back here a couple of years ago. Are you here to stay this time?
You know, it's interesting. It's 2 years this month that I moved back. And I think so. Like, my daughter just started school at Shoot Lake Road Elementary, and it's so funny because I definitely am a gypsy. I even have it like in my DNA. My mother's Hungarian, so legitimate gypsy.
Wow.
And I always feel this need to be like, oh, okay, it's time to go, it's time to change. But now that I'm really setting down some roots with my business and with obviously Willow being in school, I'm kind of having to go, oh, right, I probably am here to stay in some capacity for a while.
Well, it's a great place to live if you can travel.
Yeah.
Especially if you take your kids to Costa Rica and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, hopefully you'll stay.
Well, and that was the other thing that was really appealing too, like the international airport. So that was a big one. I know that's been available in the city for a while now, but it's important. I travel for work. I travel a lot anyways. And so, having the airport right there and just kind of not having the big issues of having this teeny little airport is important. Yeah.
Definitely.
But I think if you were to bet on it, I would be spending 75% of my time here.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, great. We're happy. So you started a company called Sangha Living. Where did the name come from, first of all?
So, it's interesting. There's a few different languages that kind of claim the word, but essentially It just, in the way that I interpret it, it means like-minded.
Mm-hmm.
And what's interesting about how it kind of came to be is I first started my business in Costa Rica. So it was a retreat center that specifically targeted very high-stressed corporate North Americans and brought them down to Costa Rica and essentially just handed you a beer and a hammock and said, there you go. No, I'm kidding. Mission accomplished. But it started off as Sangha retreats. And it was in Costa Rica, but what I was doing was I was developing stress management programming and testing it on people that came down to the retreat. So they were coming for a stress management retreat, and I was testing my programming and my theories and my concepts, and always knowing that eventually I would move this into a corporate program, which is kind of where we're operating and what's happening now.
Nice. So is it, what is it, a series of talks, or tell us about the program?
Yeah, so it's a 90-day program based in neuroscience that essentially teaches an individual or a team or a company, depending on how they're coming on board, how to manage stress and how to excel in high-performance environments. So it really focuses on optimizing brain function in high-pressure environments.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Can you give us a little details? So is it like meditation? What are we doing for 90 days?
So the way that I approach it is that, meditation, yoga, going for walks in the forest, all that stuff is fantastic. And they're wonderful tools to help bring more balance into your system. But a lot of people that are in high performance or have really fast schedules don't necessarily have the ability to find that magical extra hour in their life. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't, but when they're dealing with a lot of demands and pressure, we have to start really, really simple. We have to start with do your habits, do your daily routine habits, how you wake up to when you go to bed. Do you have more habits that are supporting your nervous system, or do you have more habits that are stimulating and triggering your nervous system? And so the program is broken down into 3 phases, and essentially there's a big educational component. A lot of people don't understand the biology of stress, like at all. We know what it feels like to be stressed.
Right.
We know how it impacts our sleep. We know how it impacts our relationships or our life, but we don't understand why. And so the educational component's really important. And then it's habit formation. So behavioral science, habit formation, with really learning these little things that you do in your day-to-day, how to create efficiency and to make sure that you're supporting your nervous system so that when these bigger stressors come about, which they do, you're not already held at this generalized stress response where you already have more stress hormones in your system just because of your day-to-day habits.
Right.
So, that's kind of really summarizing it, but
yes.
it's a little bit more in depth than that. But the reality of it all is we're really dealing with habit formation.
Right.
Yeah.
So is it for corporations or corporate people? Like, can an individual take this
Absolutely,
course?
yeah.
So you don't have to be part of a large company.
No. My background is in finance. My experience is in the corporate setting, so I initially developed it with that in mind. So I work a lot with the finance industry, the tech industry, things like that. But absolutely, the interesting thing is that it's applicable to everyone because every single human being on the planet has the exact same biological design with your autonomic nervous system. What differs between, each and every one of us is what I perceive to be stressful that triggers my fight or flight might be very different from what you perceive to be stressful. So our associations are different, but once that's happened, it's all the same.
Right. So the stress response is very similar or the same with all of us.
Yeah.
Our triggers can be very different.
Yeah.
And I guess part of your course is helping people to identify what is setting these chain reactions off.
Totally. And I think that, outside of somebody that maybe really has a particular illness, but generally, yes, we all have the same response. The other thing that's also really important for people to realize is when somebody's dealing with elevated stress hormones in their system, regardless of why, what industry, what life they're leading, but when you've got to that point where you're really just constantly dealing with that, when somebody says to you, "Oh, you should make time to meditate," or "You should make time to go go to yoga," for somebody that's at that point with how stress hormones have impacted their brain function, it's kind of like telling that person to go learn a new language. They don't have the capacity. So you have to really start small, really, really small, and start giving their nervous system a little bit of support each day. And so after time, all of a sudden you can start entering in these bigger concepts or habits, if you will. And not everybody likes yoga. So just because it's proven, and I think it's fantastic, and I think meditation's phenomenal, but it's not meant for everyone. So we can't have this blanketed approach to health and wellness because we're very unique.
Right.
So let's first start with like how you go about your day, like how you use your devices, how you fuel yourself, what are your sleep habits, what are the boundaries you have around that, like how do you associate with things? You know, what's your travel time like? Is there a habit that you can be doing in your car that helps to support your nervous system? It's all very individualized. So that's kind of my flag in the sand and soapbox sort of stance, is that I think that health and wellness a lot tries to blanket an approach for people, and we forget that we're all really unique.
Right.
And so we can't just say, well, you should just meditate.
Right. I understand why the education component to start with is so important, because we have to understand what's going on.
Yeah, you have to be able to care.
Right.
And what's great is that you can't argue your biology. Like, you can't be like, oh, well, that's not really for me. It's like, well, no, actually, that is what's happening in you.
Yeah.
So now, what are the things that maybe you would like to develop in terms of habits or awareness so that you can take some accountability to that?
Yeah. I'm curious. You said that you developed this when you were in Costa Rica, so you're selling real estate. Were you experiencing a lot of stress or seeing people with a lot of stress? Because I think if I'm coming to Costa Rica to buy a condo or a house, I'm pretty relaxed. Like, I might be excited, but like, what gave you that concept while you were there?
I burnt out.
Wow.
So I burnt out heavily in the work environment I was in.
I was assuming the opposite.
Yeah,
because you were, doing this, and it sounded like you had all this extra time, so you started to develop a...
No, I developed it after I burnt out. So I went through, your sort of typical burnout. You don't realize you're burning out until all of a sudden you're like, whoa, like I don't even want to get out of bed. I don't even want to go to work. And I eventually resigned, doing sort of, again, the typical thing where you're like, oh, if I just leave that, it's that environment. If I just leave that and take care of myself, or maybe go do a yoga teacher training, or go learn to surf more, or whatever, this is going to all be better. And you point the finger at the environment, but really, I wasn't doing anything to help manage the level of stress hormones in my system. And so what happened was, after I resigned, after I spent some time in Costa Rica, actually enjoying Costa Rica, I finally moved back to Canada. I moved to Vancouver. And what was really interesting for me was that I started to develop panic attacks and started to have anxiety the minute that I started working again. So I ended up working in the finance industry, but they allowed me to work from home. And I, had this sort of great setup. But as sort of the demands began to increase, my habitual patterns around how I managed demands and stress came right back. So that's where, for me, it really started to just make me ask questions why.
Right.
And so I spent the last 10 years doing that. So
researching.
Researching and working and studying.
So you see the stress keeps coming back in different environments.
Right.
So you realize it's not
the
environment. Might be a trigger there.
Yep, totally.
But it's your internal makeup.
Yep.
So did you, working from home in Vancouver, did you find that procrastination was an issue for you? And do you think that procrastination is a symptom of stress?
I didn't have a lot of procrastination at all. I'm really structured at home when it comes to working at home. And I also think that there's an element too with procrastination. A lot of people need that sort of pressure to get things done. Like
deadline pressure.
Deadline pressure.
Yeah.
And I think that on one hand you can say, okay, well, you're just not managing your time very well. So you're procrastinating. But on the other hand, that's their habit. That's their work habit. So I think that procrastination can also be part of a creative process for people. So I don't know if I think for some people it can cause a lot of stress because they're allowing everything to pile up at the end. I do think there's elements of procrastination that add stress.
Yeah.
But again, it's very unique to the individual. Some people like that pressure and then end up creating and developing and working in these beautiful, fantastic ways, and that's their style.
Right.
Just as long as that isn't then impacting their quality of life.
Right.
Right? So as long as their sleep is still healthy and their autonomic nervous system is still healthy and their emotional state is healthy and physically they're not breaking down, then I would say, well, hey, if that's how you like to get your stuff done, then obviously it's working for you.
Right. So tell us a little bit about your research. So you realized that the different environments were still causing this stress.
Yeah, and I mean,
you started to look.
Yeah, I started to look. I mean, I worked in a very high pressure, high stress environment in Costa Rica. My boss was totally a tyrant. Totally. However, I could have excelled in there if I was able to manage things better on my end. And so then I moved back to Vancouver, and I was kind of going back and forth between Costa Rica. So I was leaving half-time in Vancouver, half-time in Costa Rica, building this retreat center. And I had a great boss. I had a great company. I was working for a mutual fund company, and there should have been no real reason for why I was feeling the same way that I was feeling when I was with the tyrant boss. And I actually had weekends off every weekend, and in Costa Rica I never did. And there just wasn't the high pressure. Yet, as the demands increased, and in my perception, the stress of life, personally and professionally, increased, it came right back, and it came back really quick. And I started having panic attacks, and that's why I was like, what's going on?
Right.
Like, it's so weird. Like, why am I feeling this, like, sense of, like, impeding doom? Or, like, why am I so anxious all the time? Like, why am I reactive all the time over minor things?
Yes.
And so then it was like, okay, dive deep. And so I dove really, really deep into all the research I could get my hands on out there currently. So this was, 9 years ago. It's a different environment now. You can go online and there's all this information and all these programs. That wasn't the case a decade ago. It was still very, very clinical. If you even went to the doctor, it was kind of like, I think I might be stressed. They're like, okay.
Take these pills,
go to yoga. Like, there really wasn't a comprehensive analysis of why. And there was, the people around me too, like, nobody understood what to do.
Right.
I was like, I don't know what to do. And nobody else around me knew what to do.
Yeah. Well, we have various coping mechanisms, right? People drink. People spend a lot of time on Facebook, a lot of distractions to kind of distract from the stress. But you wake up the next morning and it's back, right?
Right. And so, a lot of my initial education and research was just simply my own. But then I ended up being able to serve as a researcher with the BC Cancer Association in Vancouver, which started to really make things a little bit more structured and a little bit more clinical. And all of a sudden, I started connecting dots, being like, oh, this is interesting. Like, in a high-performance environment with these pressures, oh, that's what's actually happening when we associate a trigger or stress. That's what happens in the nervous system. Oh, interesting. When we have stress hormones, that's what happens to the brain function. Oh, no wonder why then that, and so it was kind of like I started looking at it like that, and really, again, starting to test creating programming and starting to test it on everybody that came down to Costa Rica.
Neat.
Which was fun.
So people coming for vacation.
For retreats.
Or to your retreats.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah.
And so tell us about your typical client here in Kelowna. What is it a business person, business owner? What is a typical client?
Definitely a spectrum. I do deal with a lot of high-performance businesses and business owners or individuals. So I definitely am attracting the people that are riding that edge already with just their time. So they're spending more time at work than they are at home. They're trying to balance things, but they find that, at home, they're either quite exhausted or they have children, so all of a sudden it's like, there's your other full-time job that you're coming back to. So yeah, it is really a spectrum. I work in all different industries.
Right.
Yeah.
Tell us about what kind of a transformation someone can expect if they take your full 90-day program.
Yeah, and the reason why it's 90 days is because on average it takes about 66 days for somebody to develop a habit. Right. Also, I find that in 90 days, whether you're working with a company, that represents a quarter. So they're able to really tie things to profitability and productivity, as well as we tend to see your routine or your cycles. So we'll typically see through 90 days somebody that gets like, oh, wow, this is great. I feel amazing. And then all of a sudden something happens in work or something happens in your personal life that creates the dip. And it's almost like I'm looking for that because we need to establish your baseline. This is what it feels like when you do this, you get that. Oh, this is what it feels like when you don't do this, you get that. Now we have the awareness. Now we have your baseline. And so then we can start working from there. But to actually establish that, we need about 4 to 6 weeks.
Right.
Because it's almost like we need all of your triggers to come in.
Yes.
You know, it's like we're always so excited and like we expect, like, I can do this. And like you're gung-ho at the beginning. Yeah. But the reality is we're dealing with habit loops. We're dealing with neurological pathways in the brain that have been probably reinforced for decades.
Right.
So like I can't come in and like wave this magic wand and all of a sudden be like, you're fixed.
Right. Yeah. No, it totally makes sense.
Yeah, we need to understand like your rhythms.
Yes. So are you having a daily conversation with them? Are they journaling or?
So we it works there. Yeah. There's the educational component that happens at each phase. So every 4 weeks there's a really big educational component that would encompass usually a workshop or something. And then what happens is every week there is a habit or an action item that you would do, and then I actually track daily what you're doing. So you don't actually speak to me on the phone. We check in once every week. And if I'm with a company, then I'm in the office checking in with all of the individuals for 15, 20 minutes, an hour, depending on how many people there are or the extent of the program. But then everything just builds. And so I constantly am collecting data on all of these nervous systems and trying to analyze and find patterns, and what may work for you isn't going to work for you. So again, this goes back to that element of like, yeah, I could come in and say, this is how your biology is, and now everybody do this. But the reality is, you may not want to do it. Right? Because maybe you're like, I don't feel like doing that. So I need to make sure that what I'm getting you to do, you understand the science behind why, and it actually is applicable to your unique routine. Because at the end of the day, what we're trying to do each week is support the nervous system a little bit more, and a little bit more, and a little bit more. So when I start asking you to do these bigger things in like 4 or 6 weeks, you're like, yeah, no problem. I'm already feeling a difference. Give it to me. I'm ready.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So would you like to nominate someone?
Ooh. Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to nominate Charity Gerbrandt. Has she been on yet?
No.
She's very interesting.
Tell us about Charity a little bit.
Okay, so I've just recently met Charity in the last 3 months, and she has kind of been from the beginning of the tech industry here, the growth of tech industry. So she was with Club Penguin and then ended up moving into Disney, and she's just such an interesting person. In the community, and she's involved artistically in the community and creatively, but then also in tech, and so nice. I think you'd really enjoy talking to her.
Does she have a company today?
She works for a company out of Montreal. She actually lives here, but then travels as well for work, which I find a lot of people are doing right now. Yeah, it's pretty great. Yeah.
Would you spell that GERBRANDT?
Yes. And also, I think another person that would be great to talk to is Andrew Greer. Okay. He has a social impact company, and I'm probably not describing that perfectly. A tech company, but it's called Purple, which is spelled PURPL. And it's an acronym. It stands for something lovely to do with people. And again, I'll probably screw that up, so I'll let him talk to you about it.
No problem.
But he's very, very interesting as well in terms of what he's trying to do to impact our community. and to empower community-based businesses and social enterprises and things like that. So yeah, he'd be another great person.
Are you taking the medications that people are taking, the vitamins? Is that part of the central system that you're looking into?
So I like to understand if somebody's taking medication. Obviously, I'm not a dietitian, I'm not a nutritionist, I'm not a doctor. So I like to take in all the information of what's happening in your unique system, and then going, okay, how do we analyze and develop the right habits around this? But I absolutely do focus on the vitamins and minerals that are needed for your brain to manufacture neurotransmitters like dopamine and serotonin and melatonin. When we are dealing with a lot of stress, your body rips through vitamins and minerals. It rips through the nutrients because it's exhausting being held at that state where like literally that was designed to either fight a tiger or run away from it, or like stand really, really still until it moves away. Like it's a full sort of, it's all hands on deck. In terms of your entire body when you have a stress response. And so when that happens, your brain's like, hey, give me all the fuel I need. Like we have to get everything going. And so a lot of times people don't realize that they're deficient. And so the brain, actually an interesting thing, your brain uses your dopamine to manufacture your stress hormones. Wow. So that's kind of like the double-edged sword where it's like, okay, so my brain uses a lot of my nutrients when I'm stressed, and then my brain also uses my dopamine to manufacture these stress hormones, or some of the stress hormones. So it's really, really important that, like, for instance, vitamin C, B complex, magnesium, L-tyrosine, like these are things that, you know, I would certainly go into Nature's Fair. Like I'm such a fan of Nature's Fair or Natural Resources down on Ellis. Yes. Where you can go and just simply say, hey, I heard this. Like, should I be taking this? And they usually have dietitians right on the floor, or, you know, just very, very knowledgeable people. Because I want to make sure, disclaimer, like, don't start taking what I'm saying without checking with your doctor. But yeah, these are things that we should be paying attention to. Again, I think with health and wellness, it's like, oh, well, you should become a vegetarian, or you should stop eating gluten, or you should do this or that. And it's like, maybe you really like bread. And maybe you're okay not being like the fittest person in the world because you just enjoy bread. So, you know, like, great. So, like, for me, So, like, I approach it more like, I don't care what you love to eat. Yeah. What I care about in terms of stress is ensuring that your brain has the right building blocks to manufacture those things that it needs. Right. Because when we have low-level nutrients, that in itself is super triggering to the nervous system. Like, you will actually be triggered because the nervous system is trying to give you a message. Hey, pay attention. I'm not operating properly right now. But then when we're stressed, we don't have time, so we eat this like quick processed food, and we don't realize that we're actually compounding stress just with these habits. Right. So, yeah.
So it's about optimizing the individual, not trying to change them into a different individual.
100%. Couldn't have said it better. Yeah.
Do you feel like a counselor when you have to delve into the ingrained habits?
I mean, it's interesting. There probably is an element of, that sort of setting. And you end up developing like really intimate, if you will, relationships with people because stress impacts everything. You come in and at first you're talking about their work environment, so they're less guarded. But the reality is all of a sudden, 4 weeks later, we're talking about how it's impacting your marriage or what have you. So I have to, again, like I'm not a psychologist, so I always bring it back to like the biology of stress and that. But absolutely, I mean, people cry with me a lot. but it's also because I think too, like we're never given the opportunity to have a low risk conversation around the fact that like I can't handle my shit right now.
Right.
And
our culture doesn't let us.
No, and it almost feels like this moral failing. Right. That I don't, and I go, listen, the reason why you can't handle it is because you don't understand. It's just, and that's okay. So let's create that understanding. Let's develop the awareness, and then you can operate from choice. And then if you're going to still do all those things that you now know are not healthy for your nervous system when you're in your work week, well, that's on you. You're an adult. right? But until then, we need to, I really encourage people that I work with to approach it like they're researchers.
Yes.
So, like, what's the data showing us? Instead of it being emotionally connected, like, I can't handle my life. It's like, let's see what the data's showing us right now. Let's see what messages your nervous system's giving you. Oh, you're not sleeping very well right now. Well, what kind of message would that be? And why? Let's figure out why. Mm-hmm. Instead of, like, you can't handle your life. Like, that's not a good approach.
That's that blanket again.
Right, exactly. Or, just, everybody, when a lot of people approach burnout, all of a sudden they're like, okay, I'm taking a vacation. Mm-hmm. Super reactive. Because when you come back, guess what? About 10 days later, same things. You're just starting that cycle again. Yeah.
Right. So what's the best way for someone to find out more about your programs? And it's pronounced Sangha?
Yeah. But but I'm happy with, if people say Sangha too, it's either or. It's however you want it to be.
Okay. Good to know. So what's the best way for people to find out more? Or to get in touch?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, absolutely go to the website. So that's sangaliving.com. We are on social, but you won't necessarily find me on social. I have a fantastic student that works with me. But yeah, there is the social media. So at Sangha Living on Instagram, Sangha Living Facebook, it is managed, but I have quite a strong boundary around that because it's distracting for me.
I see. Yeah. Good. I turned off notifications on my social media because it's like ridiculous.
Yeah, I mean, I do pop on every now and then, but it's very, very sporadically. Yeah. One of my girlfriends just was like, because she just had a great trip, and I was like, "How was your trip?" And she's like, "Well, didn't you see the pictures on Instagram?" And I was like, "No, I don't follow you guys on Instagram. I'm not really on there." And she's like, "Well, how do you know what we're up to?" And I'm like, "I just asked." And it's great.
Wow. Amazing. Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Awesome.
It's been a great conversation.
Yeah, a good way to kick off our Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Actually, I have two more people.
Okay. Great.
So one more person would be Jay Gervais. So him and his family moved out here long time ago from, I want to say Manitoba, I think. But they have been like quite a staple down by the Grand. So his family did all the boat rentals and like even, those little paddle boats that go through, what's that area there?
Well, there's
like
the
canals.
lockups.
Yeah, the canals, yeah. So he might be really interesting to talk to because they've been quite a staple in that part of the city for a long time. And then Reagan Hall, Blonde Store. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Also, she has Blonde Store down on Bernard, which is just obviously a fantastic place to go shop. But I believe she was born and raised here, and so she's very, very interesting to talk to as well.
Wonderful. Great.
Luke Mankus is a realtor. He loves what he does. We asked Luke if he had any regrets about moving here in 2011, and he always says, yeah, one regret, and that is he didn't move here sooner. When Luke came here, he didn't know anyone. He didn't know the neighborhoods or anything or anyone besides his daughter, who was 6 years old at the time. So he knows what it's like. Now, he's an expert and has helped well over 100 single people, couples, families, and investors with their real estate needs in the Okanagan. If you're new to our beautiful city, Luke can help you get connected with great lawyers, dentists, carpenters, landscapers, swimming pool installers, you name it. And whether you're new to Kelowna or not, Luke knows real estate. He can help you find a great property, negotiate a good deal, and hold your hand all the way through the process until the day you get your shiny new set of keys. Luke is known as a no-pressure kind of guy. He's had clients where it took even a year or more to get them into a property. He just doesn't believe in rushing things. On the other hand, when you decide it's time to act, he's diligent, and he'll work day and night until the job is done. Give Luke Mankus a call or a text message at any time, 778-215-4273. Again, that's 778-215-4273. 778-215-4273 to chat with Luke about real estate.